Well, welcome everyone. This is our Tuesday, May the 10th, 2022 session in our series on entrepreneurship in Asia high-tech industries. I'm Richard Dasher. I direct the U.S. Asia Technology Management Center. We're very happy to be able to produce this series, and we want to thank our member companies, which are the primary source of revenues, financing for our center, which is really why we can produce this series. Today, everybody's on Zoom. Our students are in the watching by Zoom as well as our public audience. So welcome to everybody. I have to say it's a really special pleasure to be able to welcome back a Stanford alum every time we have a Stanford alum, but especially when it's somebody that I actually taught years ago when you were in class. And Shiho Watabe is going to talk to us today about an exciting project in a very distinctive place, I would say unique place in Japan. And she'll tell us more about that. Usually I give a long drawn out introduction to somebody to explain how distinguished they are and all the things that they've done. And Shiho deserves every bit of that, but you can tell the story a lot better than I can. Shiho, let me turn the microphone over to you and let you get started. Thanks so much for coming today.
All right, thank you for having me today. I'm Shiho, and I'm an advisor to the City of Shibuya. I work with the city government to build a startup ecosystem in the city. So today I would love to talk about what the city is doing to create a truly global startup environment in the city. So I'm here to talk about Shibuya, the startup city, and I'm an advisor to the city government, to the mayor, and I'm helping the city to build a startup ecosystem in the middle of Tokyo. So today I'm going to talk all about it. Next slide. Let's see. Do you see the next slide?
Yep.
Great. Okay. So before we start, I will tell you a bit about myself. I've spent 16 years in tech marketing and business. After graduating Stanford, I worked for Morgan Stanley as an investment banker. And then a few years later, I changed my career to marketing by joining Google in 2008. I had a good decade at Google, working and living in Asia, Europe, Africa, and eventually moving to Silicon Valley in 2014. After leaving Google, I worked in startups at various stages from Series A to much later stage like pre-IPO, going public. I started to work with Shibuya's local government while I was back in Tokyo during the pandemic back in 2021. In fact, Shibuya is my hometown. My parents still live there and the mayor lives in the same neighborhood, etc. So this whole opportunity felt like it's a full circle moment for me when I came across this opportunity. Next slide. And now I'm introducing two figures from the city government. Yoshi is a director of Global Strategy Division at Shibuya City Government. He is a leader on the government side to create a startup ecosystem with the support of the mayor. They are the two visionaries in the government, as well as the force behind everything leading up to this point. The next slide, introducing Shibuya. So I will tell you a bit about the city, Shibuya. Shibuya is a part of Tokyo, and it's a major commercial and financial center. It houses two of the busiest railway stations in the world. One is Shinjuku Station. It's at least the southern half is in Shibuyaku, and Shibuya Station. And the city is known for its history and influence on pop culture and fashion. Some of you might recognize these pop culture references on the slide. There are some tourist attractions and iconic locations that appear in many movies, like the Shibuya Crossing. Meiji Jingyu, Meiji Shrine that you can see on the slide. The Japanese government-owned TV station, NHK, is in Shibuya as well. It's actually right next to the city government building. And Omotesando, which you can see on the slide, is the Fifth Avenue equivalent in Japan. Shibuya has a young population, and it also has a major nightlife area. The population is over 220,000 last time I checked. And most importantly, the city really fights for diversity. Shibuya became the first city to make same-sex partnership legal. The city's slogan is turning difference into force. When you live in Shibuya, you realize, you actually see the city is doing a lot to promote diversity. And diversity for genders, different age groups, economic statuses, and inclusivity for people with disabilities, and all kinds of groups are celebrated in the city. Next slide. Startup hub city. So as for the city's history as a startup hub in Japan, it dates back to 90s when the city got the nickname Bit Valley. This is because there was a concentration of early tech pioneers in the city, like Cyber Agent, DNA, GMO Internet, Mixi. Also, Shibuya geographically looks like a valley. It's like a dome-shaped geographically. So that's where the nickname came from. Then the more recent development also shows the city's presence as a startup hub. Today, Shibuya is home to over 2,000 startups, over 60 VCs, and good numbers of co-working spaces and accelerators. The city also has uniquely good access to the top universities. Shibuya also has been the first place that a lot of global tech companies pick as their first Japan headquarters. Some examples are Google, Stripe, and I think Amazon used to be in Shibuya too.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. Next slide. So this is the overview of Shibuya Startup Support. And Shibuya
Shiho, before we get into the Shibuya Startup Support,
mm-hmm.
I want to ask you, why is Shibuya so progressive and forward-looking? And you know, why do you think it was the hub back in the 1990s?
That's a good question. And I think it's because Shibuya is really vibrant. And back in the 80s, when I was a kid living and growing up in Shibuya, there was this huge sort of like a pop culture explosion of young people moving into the city and dressing in all kinds of crazy ways. Mm-hmm. And there is this sort of air that there's this sort of like a vibe in the air where no one judges anything, no one judges anything. You do something crazy and it is accepted. People think it's cool. And I think there is that foundation, cultural foundation. And back in 70s too, a lot of foreigners will come and party in Shibuya. So it's always been this place where different cultural people from different cultural backgrounds gather and make something new, and no one judges. So there's that cultural aspect. Yeah. And also pure size of the city, economically, and of course, population-wise, it's big. So I think Minato City and Shibuya City, these are the two cities that are big in terms of you know, how many people live and how many people work in the cities. Those two places are pretty big. So a lot of tech pioneers came to Shibuya to try something new. And yeah.
Yeah, that, and I do wonder if the youth factor is big there. When you go back to the those pictures of the mayor and Mr. Tasaka,
Yeah,
right? They're both really young looking compared to what you usually see for somebody in a position like that. You
yeah,
know, typically they would be 30 years older than that easily. And most city governments, or, you know, even in the national government.
mm, yeah. That's right. I think the mayor is famous for he's kind of iconic, and he is just known for being really popular by people, by the people
Hmm.
who, the residents, and being, I think he was in his early 40s when he was first elected, and he's
Hmm.
been constantly being the pick of the people. So that's how I knew him, because I'm a resident as well. So
Hmm.
yes, um, yeah, I think
Okay.
thinking,
So, sorry to interrupt a little bit, but I thought that that would be kind of, you know, we shouldn't let that go. That's really kind of key to this whole thing, is that Shibuya just feels different than just about all the other places in Tokyo around it. You know, you've got the financial center and more downtown and so forth. But this is definitely, at least for the last 30 or 40 years, like you said, young people's hangout.
mhm, yes, yeah. And just to add, people really do matter in this project. And I was really happy and surprised to see how I guess when I work with the people in Shibuya city government, it doesn't feel like I'm working with the government. And Yoshi, who's
Wow.
leading the whole project, he was living in Bay Area for many years. So yeah, the entire team feels like a good fusion of government and
Mhm.
Silicon Valley. So it's pretty awesome.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Let me let you get back to what you were talking about with
Wow.
Shibuya Startup Support.
Yes. So I think I was on this
Hmm.
slide.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So So definitely Shibuya city government is dedicated to supporting startups. This is why they launched Shibuya Startup Support back in 2020. Um, and we call it SSS here. So SSS serves as an umbrella program that houses all the efforts by the city to support startups. For foreign entrepreneurs, the city has visa program and other help to get their companies ready to do business in Japan, including assisting with the incorporation process or opening bank accounts, housing, getting cell phones. For all entrepreneurs, Shibuya offers holistic support in matters including office space and POC. And the city has more than 100 corporate partners to drive growth for the startups. To go over each item more specifically, a startup visa program was launched in March 2021. Over 100 company founders applied despite the border closure during the pandemic, and 15 visas were issued. Shibuya interviews the startups and screen. That's why it goes down to 15. And the Immigration Service Agency of Japan issued the visas. It's still early days, but in the process, we see the kind of entrepreneurs who are interested in our program. So far, they are very diverse. Geographically, we got some from Europe, like France, Holland, UK, Ireland, and also from Asia Pacific, like China, India, Australia, and some from US and North America, of course. And it's pretty well distributed. Originally, we expected more applicants from China or Hong Kong due to the government's crackdown in their own countries, but maybe we will see more of them later. The areas of focus are a pretty wide range as well. DX, obviously, blockchain, deep tech, like a drone, VR, renewable energy. while there are a diverse bunch in terms of incentives, they all have a strong passion for problems that are unique to Japan, such as education, medical system, or prop tech, tourism, sustainability, so on and so forth. And it's notable some of these companies are already well-funded and have significant traction in their home countries, and others are much earlier in their journey. And I'm not sure if this level of interest was originally anticipated at the launch, because the program launched in the middle of the pandemic and the border was closed, and I don't think there was a lot of marketing efforts went in at the beginning, but 100 people somehow found out and applied from overseas.
Shiho, can I interrupt again?
Yes.
You're talking about these overseas companies coming in. Are they coming in through the Smooth Landing program that's mentioned on the slide, or this Innovation for New Normal program? I've got a little bit lost with where you are on the slide.
Sure. So I'm talking about the Smooth Landing program. Actually, I'm talking about the visa program, and 100 founders applied for the entrepreneur visas. And Shibuya basically interviews those people and give the list of people who passed the interview by Shibuya to the immigration agency, and no question asked. From there, they're going to issue the visa.
So this is specific to the startup visa program?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
And if you get the visa from Shibuya, then you're going to be the Shibuya startups, and you can take advantage of the Smooth Landing program, which comes with all kinds of bank account setup or incorporation support. And these are the things that we learned are difficult for overseas founders. So, and the POC program is, of course, available for all founders, whether you're domestic or overseas foreign founders. So I was talking about the visa program.
Yeah. So let me read a couple of comments, or one comment and one question from the audience. Ray Tsuchiyama, Ray, welcome to the program. Delighted you're with us today. Was representing MIT's Industry Liaison Program in Japan for a long time, and then became an entrepreneur himself and so forth. Ray points out that as far back as the 1960s and 70s, there were art exhibitions and fashion shows at the Seibu and Parco department stores in Shibuya that were more youth-oriented than in the famous Ginza shopping area. He says, iMode apps were launched in Shibuya in the late 1990s, and that drew many telecom and internet people from the US and Europe. This was the origin of the Bit Valley you're talking about. Back to Ray's point, many visitors at the Starbucks overlooking Shibuya Crossing, almost like one of the famous restaurants in Silicon Valley with the paper napkins that people would write business plans on. It has that kind of cultural sort of meaning in Japan. And then Shankar asks a great question. I'd love to know the top 3 or 5 startups in terms of revenue attainment. What do you think over the years, maybe since 1999, what the 3 or 4 biggest, most successful companies coming out of Shibuya have been?
As I mentioned, I think the tech pioneers, GMO, Internet, DNA, Mixi.
Yeah, okay, so DNA was a very big, it still is, kind of gaming software platform that is really one of the leading platforms for development, as well as publishing its own games in the industry. They've certainly become a big public company. You were mentioning, what was the next one you mentioned?
Mixi.
Oh, Mixi, Japan's answer to Facebook, which had to go through a major pivot. And as Facebook gradually, came in and took over Japan, Mixi also became a kind of a publishing platform, and has continue to do very well. Would you add one more company there?
Or there are lots, but DNA is one, and Digital Garage is kind of like a conglomerate of tech company. They do a lot of things, including venture investing. And I believe they started in Shibuya. It's usually either Shibuya or Minato. So it's
Yeah.
always between the two. And when you actually step back and you're asking only about Shibuya startups, I guess, then these
More
are.
or less, yeah. Although I do think that Google moving in and putting their Japan headquarters right next to Shibuya Station was a major change in the neighborhood. And that
Yeah,
just happened a couple of years ago.
yes. So Google, when they first landed in Japan, they started in Shibuya. And that's when I started working at Google back in 2007 or 8-ish. And then they moved to Roppongi, Minato city, the neighboring city, just as big, because the rent's cheaper there. That was the remembering, that was, and then it came back to Shibuya a couple of years ago. And that was a big win for Shibuya because Google is such a force in the industry. Yeah.
Couple of great questions about this startup visa program. Sasha asked what's necessary in order to pass the startup visa interview. What was specific to the 15 out of 100 successful applicants?
Yeah, I can address this within the knowledge that I have because I'm not actually there at the interview. But I do know Shibuya Startup Support team has advisors who, some of them are venture capitalists who are very much active in Japan and overseas. And the committee filter for businesses that will be successful in the same way that they would decide on their investments. And that's one criteria. And second criteria would be, is this business, do they really need to be in Japan? Are they going to thrive in Japan? Could they be elsewhere? So I guess it's not going to be as strict as getting millions of dollars from a venture capital, but I know it is somewhat in the same way that they judge who should be in or out. Within my knowledge, that's how they do it.
Okay. Couple of comments I want to read. Dominique mentions that Miho Tanaka, startup visa lead at Shibuya Startup, has been an excellent source of support and constant advocate on behalf of foreign startups who aspire to launch in Japan, and puts in the link. So that's great information for everybody. Right before her, Arthur has asked, are there more details on the services for overseas founders? The throttle business link seems to be in Japanese, and skimming didn't have many overseas details. So let me ask, are you going to talk more about that in subsequent slides, or is now the time to address the kind of services for overseas founders?
Yeah, that question is actually very well timed. I was gonna go on and talk about the POC program and Smooth Landing program. Like, let me talk about that, address that question, because I was gonna just straight right into the POC program. So Smooth Landing program is a actively work in progress, meaning the list of things that they will add onto it. They're still constantly building it. As far as I know, what they already have is legal service. Incorporation in Japanese language could be really difficult for the foreign founders, right? So they're going to help you with that. And bank account, setting up corporate bank account and personal bank account could be really tricky if you are
Mhm.
not Japanese, and we'll help you with that. And housing, getting cell phones, these things are also, we heard from foreign founders or someone who's not Japanese coming into Japan, could be pretty tricky. So this is going to be like a holistic support for you to get a smooth landing. That's why they call a smooth landing program. And you can go to Shibuya Startup Support.jp website to sort of explore more. They have the full list of what's available today, and they're going to add some more services, like I know cell phone service or personal bank account service will be added. It is not available as of today, but it'll be added. Yeah, so that's a
Okay.
smooth funding, and I can talk to POC program.
Okay.
And basically
Yeah,
going,
I think that would be great.
yeah. So the POC program also started during the pandemic, and Shibuya leverages the city's resources to test your products. And this POC program is called Innovation for the New Normal. Out of over 200 applications, we've accepted 35 startups. And this is the first year, 200 applications and 35 accepted. And some of them are local startups and others are from overseas. And this is pretty neat. I see this coverage of this childcare robotics company's product being tested in local nurseries, as well as an analytics startup, analytics software for toilet vacancy. The product is being tested in a large local shopping mall. Or there's this cross-border e-commerce service that will be tested by one of the corporate partners we work with. So a lot of companies are applying, and it's a rolling admission process that we're running. And as you can tell from the name of this program, a lot of startups in this program were solving problems related to the pandemic, but this program is expanding and evolving since it launched, and it'll accommodate, now it is accommodating all types of startups. Yeah, and also local residents are keen to be the testers. And there are about 800 registered residents and counting, which is pretty neat. And finally, our consortium, Shibuya Startup Deck. Shibuya Startup Deck has over 100 corporate members. There are, half of them are Japan's top 500 corporations. And the mission of the consortium is to create an environment in Shibuya where startups can take on challenges without fear. The group has a list of impressive advisors, including Professor Suzuki from Tokyo University, CEOs of Shibuya's tech giants like Mixi, GMO, Digital Garage, Cyber Agent, as well as DNA. So our service keeps on growing, as I mentioned. So you can follow all the service and programs available from the link that's on the bottom of this slide. Any questions? If not, then I'll move on.
I think this is good for now. The logos over on the right-hand side are, of course, giant companies, right?
Yeah, just a small part of the 100 members in the consortium. The consortium is called Startup Deck.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay.
And this next slide is Shibuya Startup Support 2020 to 2022. Okay, so this is a snapshot of all the activities that took place since late 2020 when SSS started. Activities are aligned with the four main objectives: global outreach, infrastructure, partnership, and POC. And as you can see, just an incredible amount was achieved by a small team in Shibuya City government. And the mayor is fully committed to supporting the initiative. So that has a lot to do with the team's success in getting things done. I will not go over everything for the time's sake, but I'll take a moment for you to take a look at this slide. And if you have any questions, please do allocate them for Q&A later.
And also, I can say that we'll post the slides on our website. And of course, if you're watching the video, you can stop the video at this point and watch for as long as you can. Maybe I can ask you to look at the very bottom, what's happening in 2022. This is kind of interesting, the things this year.
That's the next slide, actually.
Okay, great.
Yeah, so if you are ready to move on, then I know this is quite overwhelming amount of information here. Okay, I'll move on. So coming next year, or this year actually, plans in 2022. SS office space for startup visa holders, which opened in April. And Portal Point Shibuya is the name of the building. We can Google it, I guess. A community management team from Slush started in May so that they can start building a startup community in the city. Startup media in English. So when I spoke with the team in Shibuya initially, they studied other cities, global cities that successfully built global startup ecosystems. And one of the things that they were doing that Japan wasn't doing was this, like more of broadcasting Japanese startups to the world in the English language. So they're launching the website. And finally, our accelerator, which we hope happens sometime this year. It will happen sometime this year. And this is yet to be. So please take the next section as more like a teaser rather than a grand announcement of the program. But this is very much actively work in progress. So we're quite excited about this. Okay, next slide. So what is this accelerator? We want to create a community of globally minded startups in the city and support them with all the resources available, from the amplified version of the existing SSS program, including Startup Deck and POC program, to access to advisors, mentors, and PR opportunities. We're starting out without any specific focus verticals or stages in mind. Anyone is welcome to apply, and the language used in the program will be English. It's also good to note here that in the best way possible, this accelerator itself is kind of like a startup. So we will start with an MVP type of thing, and we'll aim to work towards product market fit as we go along. But we feel pretty good about the customer insights we gained through running SSS programs in the past years. So we have a solid base to roll out this acceleration program. Next slide.
So Shiho, can you go back to that previous slide real quick? It says globally minded founders. Is your target really Japanese entrepreneurs who want to take their companies global, or people coming from outside Japan into Japan?
Thank you for the question.
Or both?
Actually, both. So
Okay.
in an ideal world, we get half and half. And when we look at the applications from overseas for SSS program, it's predominantly for foreigners, right? How SSS is structured as of today. So we're expecting foreign entrepreneurs to apply to come to Japan. And it's not fun if they stay among us, like just with each other. So we want to actually encourage Japanese domestic founders to join this program too. Yeah,
I see. Okay.
that's why we're not really specifying that, expecting both Japan.
Okay. Thank you.
Next slide. Why do this? So I was building this. Our hope was this to be like a platform to empower all players involved. First of all, we want to enable foreign talents, talents from overseas in and out of Japan. It'll be good for Japan. And secondly, we expect a positive influence on the Japanese ecosystem, whether it's for the domestic startups or big corporations. And local players can grow through the exposure and competition from the foreign startups. And lastly, and importantly, we hope this really gives back to the local community. When more successful companies are based in Shibuya, they will bring more people living and working in the city. And this means more business and opportunities for the local ecosystem, local small businesses or local youth who are looking for jobs. Also, we expect positive social impact on the local community. Think about like how great it will be for young kids in Shibuya to grow up in a city where ideas like entrepreneurship and diversity and innovation is encouraged. I think and there's that too. The next slide, Shibuya startups. So not all the details are fixed at this moment for the program, but there are a few things that are pretty firm on our end at this point. One of them is what type of founders and startups this accelerator will be serving. The team has been working with the founders, both domestic and foreign, in the past 1 year. In the process, we're forming a rough idea of what Shibuya startups look like, almost like a persona of those companies. So I named this slide Shibuya startups to talk about the characteristics that we would like to see. So first, Shibuya startups come with local insights, like the inspiration is local and unique to Shibuya, but it has a chance to gain global traction in the future. And Shibuya startups also change the way people do things. Obviously, challenging today's norms is critical in giving birth to an idea. If you're new to the city, your experience in Shibuya will give you new perspectives that will fuel this spirit, because Shibuya is so different and kind of thought-provoking. And lastly, we're biased for startups that have social impact, and of course, as well as profitability. But social impact is very important to us. And I brought some examples of startups that Shibuya has worked with in the past year. And these startups founders came from different places, some from Japan, others from overseas, but they all represent the characteristics I just mentioned. So there's a company called SolarDuck. It's a renewable energy company founded in Holland, and one of the co-founders came to Shibuya through our visa program. We like that their mission is tied to obviously renewable energy SDG, moving fast, but with long-term big impact in mind. And they saw a unique advantage of being in Japan because 70% of Japan is mountainous. So it's costly and tough to build energy plants inland. So why not have a solar panel floating in the ocean? So another example is this company called Placey. Placey is a participant in Shibuya's POC program. It's developing a map application that lets you search places with sounds. It's founded by a Japanese entrepreneur who has studied in MIT Media Lab. And they do stuff like partnering with Spotify to recommend bars based on your music taste. Their service could change the way local small businesses do marketing or how tourism events are promoted. This company inspiration is from Shibuya, which is filled with music and tourism events and young people who love music. And another example would be this NFT company that's minting graffitis in the city. It's called Totem NFT. This example is interesting because the founder, who is from America, he was looking at the illegal graffitis on the wall, and he decided to mint it, and that'll be a revenue source for those graffiti artists. And also the city spends a lot of money, tax money, to erase graffiti on the wall, public walls. So it has that social impact aspect as well. And yeah, so it's good to mention that, not just limited to graffiti. Shibuya has a lot of IPs, like entertainment contents like fashion, tourism, that are great for Web 3.0 disruption. And outside of this too, like there are a lot of startups that could choose Japan. Like obvious ones would be any earthquake related startups. We have not worked with them, but we admire One Concern, which started in Stanford. It's a good example of someone who should be in Japan, and they are in Japan. Or any startups that want to tackle problems in aging society. There is a company in our POC program that monitors old people's health using AI. In fact, our POC program has a lot of companies that's dedicated to solving problems in senior care. So Japan definitely has a lot of data in that area. I also see tourism related foreign startups coming into the city too. The other day I saw a Danish founders company in Japan called Pivot that makes tax refund easier for local shops and travelers. And it's perfect to be tested in Shibuya because foreign tourists come and they shop. So, and B2B or DX is obviously huge. And there are a number of companies who are in Shibuya ecosystem to tackle that. Also, some startups see Japan as the entrance to Asia. Like I saw an e-commerce analytics startup that came to Shibuya to help Japanese companies sell things in China, or this payment fintech company that does cross-border payment fintech app. So these are all interesting and have strategic reasons to be in Japan. And having said this, though, we're definitely looking forward to discovering and learning through the application process and discovering like potential of Japan as a startup launchpad. So please reach out to me if you know great startups for our accelerator. Referrals are massively welcome.
Yeah,
So,
Shiho. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna just wrap up by saying, so this is the end of my presentation, and thank you for listening. I look forward to hearing your thoughts and feedback, and please don't hesitate to reach out.
Okay, thank you very much. Why don't you stop sharing slides and let's talk for a little bit.
Okay.
So I want to ask, you know, how are you able to, you know, talk, even though this is still in the approval process, right? What's the kind of, where should people look for more information as the program is officially launched? What kind of a time frame do you think informally, do you think things are going to become, you know, fully approved and put into the newspapers and a website go up and all of this?
Yeah, I think the Shibuya Startup Support website, and they have a LinkedIn. So these two Shibuya Startup Support LinkedIn page, as well as their website, will be the best place to look.
Okay. We've got several questions, and a lot of them are great questions. The first question from Dewey, who is a student in our class, and so Dewey, thank you for asking the question, is if there are any tax incentives for founders and employees under the current programs, and if so, in which sectors? So first of all, I want to know how you answer that, but I have a few things I'd like to say on this topic.
Yes, that's a very good question. So when I spoke with the straight answer, a simple answer would be, as far as I know, no. But I will not say that for the future. The team in Shibuya is actually working on the ways to make things easier and build the ecosystem as an attractive place to be for global founders. So as far as I know, global founders, they always ask me, like, is there any tax benefit of being in Shibuya? And what I say to them is there's no tax incentive for being in Silicon Valley. It was never the case. So California is horrible now. So that's what I say. But yeah, so
No, and actually that's a pretty good parallel. Years ago, there was a delegation from a major Japanese prefecture coming into Silicon Valley, and they were talking about, come locate your company here. And they ran into that question, and the people in the delegation didn't even understand it. The reason is because taxes in Japan work very differently. Basically, the Central Ministry of Finance for the central government is in control of almost everything, and a local could not offer even a local tax incentive very easily. It would be like pulling teeth in the national government to be approved to do that. But as you say, this doesn't apply to Silicon Valley. And what you have in this, Shibuya Startup Support Program is what you see a lot in Silicon Valley. Local governments that have great offices that will help entrepreneurs navigate their way through a very complex regulatory system that will help locate the resources that they need, real estate or human resources or whatever. And that's, worth its weight in gold, but tax incentives aren't going to happen in Japan anytime soon.
Yeah.
I want to read this comment and question from Greg Ruchik. It's great to see Greg in the audience. Hi, my startup was in Machida, but I'm partial to Shibuya. I'm wondering if Shibuya Startup Support will offer skill up workshops so founders get their deal with each other right, set guardrails for business plan assumptions, seed funding, and IP. And will folks like me get a chance to teach these skills and concepts if we're interested?
Yeah, that's very much in line with what we're thinking about for the upcoming acceleration. So thanks for asking.
Yeah, and Greg, I'll put you in touch with Shiho later because I think it's great to see you in the program today, and I think this would be very interesting networking. Arthur asks, the startup page mentioned that founders would work with the Shibuya city government. Can you elaborate on that? I'm personally interested in biotech, and I'm wondering if it would be possible to work with the health system / public health departments. Again, you have to think about what's local and what's run by the national government.
Yeah.
Right?
While the Shibuya government, as far as I know, again, actually, my partner in crime from the Shibuya city government just text me to say that he is in the audience. But then again, I'm not sure if he will jump in today. However, I know Shibuya government is working closely with the national level as well, obviously for things like visas, or they're trying to be the special zone for the startups, right? So there is that collaboration and conversations constantly happening that's being held. Having said that, when it comes to helping the specific founders on their POCs or partnership initiatives, like we haven't gotten to that point of collaboration yet. So I guess we hope to get there someday, but then again, as of today, not yet, I guess would be the answer.
Well, I think that the thing is that this is something to put on the table. One thing is that this is still so much in the planning stage that, you know, you can see how you might work that out. And, you know, maybe Tasaka-san can help with seeing what might work in something in the future when you have a specific item to talk about. Really depends on what it is. You remember there's three levels to think about. There's the city level, which is Shibuya. Then there's the whole Tokyo Metropolitan District, right? Which is really equivalent to a state. And then there's the national government. And so some things are at the metropolitan district level too. But having liaison with people in city government would be a great way to be able to at least find out who the right people to talk to are and possibly get some help in reaching them. So, you know, I think that it will be really interesting to see how this goes. Really asks another question. She says, Japan is known to be blockchain friendly. What about Shibuya's policy about the blockchain and crypto sector? Shiho?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Blockchain and the whole Web 3.0, it's definitely on the radar. Having said that, there's no, policies when it comes to business regulations or tax incentives that are fully established and available for you as a blockchain founder in the city of Shibuya as of today. But I think it's something that we would love to develop and work on, and having conversation with national level government as well, right? I think that's the direction the entire, actually the nation is headed to. But there isn't anything that is that you probably do not know. There's no gift that I can surprise you with in this talk, I guess, when it comes to blockchain.
Only that it's a very active sector, and you're seeing a lot of startups, not only with, you know, the traditional crypto exchanges and that kind of thing, but a lot of Web 3.0.
Yes, yeah. So we're definitely like seeing many foreign founders wanting to come to Japan to do NFT 3. Web 3.3, Web 3.0 projects.
Yeah.
And I think it all goes back to the fact that Japan has a lot of IPs, games, anime, even like tourism sector, I think could be really interesting for tokenization, or it's all about the communities. And Japan is known for having those amazing cultural assets. So I see a lot of foreign founders, startups, some of them pretty developed big companies reaching out to us to talk about projects. So yeah, I think it's going to get pretty big. Web 3.0 will be a big topic for us moving forward, no doubt.
Okay. We're getting several, you know, really nice kind of encouraging comments coming into chat. I want to ask you, Shiho. So I think that Japan has a horrible reputation about being a place where women are still constrained. And there has only recently been the first venture capital firm that's completely run by women, started a couple of years ago. And this is, how do you plan to be involved in this and not just get shoved over to the side?
Yeah, so Shibuya
This is a
has,
personal question for you.
oh, personal question for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I can address that from Shibuya government's point of view and my personal point of view. So Shibuya does so much to make sure that women are not ignored or dismissed in this startup slash tech sector. They have, when I go back to the slide list of things that they do, the initiative snapshot slide actually featured a lot of initiatives that push women, female entrepreneurs and female advisors and mentors. So they're definitely conscious about building that. They're really, really investing a lot in it. And if you go to the Shibuya Startup Support website, you see a new program that is for acceleration program for Japanese high school girls and young women. I think initiatives like that from the city is really quite a statement, and statement is important. And I believe if we keep on doing this, then it's going to lead to a solid track record. It's going to take time, but something's got to start. So, and personally, I feel that, of course, it is important. And I had half my career outside of Asia. I consider myself, I worked in Africa, Europe, Silicon Valley, and now I'm back to Asia, Japan. And I feel that Japanese women are so talented. They're so smart, and they're so hungry for the opportunities. So I want to do everything I can to support those people and grow myself as well, so that I can join the movement that's happening in Japan, because movements there in Japan. But it is true that it's kind of something to see. It's so hard to find female entrepreneurs. Like it's just so hard. The ratio is 1 to 9 or even worse sometimes.
So we have a comment from Max who says that he doesn't think Japan is that blockchain friendly because crypto earnings are taxed at a very high rate.
Yeah,
And
true.
I'd like to comment on that. That's true, but so is other kinds of things in Japan. Japan into crypto trading. A lot of the, a lot of the trading that's going on in Asia is kind of almost moving the world, and the leaders in the amount of trading that's happening. Arthur asks, you briefly mentioned that Shibuya is disability friendly. Could you elaborate on that? I'm not familiar with disability legislation or culture in Japan.
Just give
Yeah, that's to you.
Sorry, can you repeat the question again? Sorry.
Well, we had a little bit of internet trouble too, I think.
Yeah.
So tell more about Shibuya being disability friendly. How, how does that work? Arthur is not familiar with, disability legislation or kind of, culture in that regard in Japan.
Yeah. I wonder what he means by that, but I do know that the mayor has this program to sort of lift up people with differences, including disabilities, people with disabilities who are very talented in arts displaying their arts and actually, using that art across the city, or there are so many things that are done. So I wonder specifically what he's talking about by saying it. And in general, like it's no one initiative or fancy marketing campaign will deliver that, right? I think it's the conscious efforts and like acknowledgement that we have every day, reminder that we have every day to sort of make the city disability friendly. And I think the city is doing quite a lot to make us be educated in that area. So
Yeah, this is one of those areas that Japan has changed a lot just in the very recent last few years. It used to be that people were kind of hidden, and the public transportation system in Japan involved climbing up and down an awful lot of stairs. But I'm seeing a lot more physical kind of accommodations, and I'm seeing much more awareness in building planning and in design. I don't know if that's really Shibuya so much as it is just a general kind of trend, but I would expect Shibuya to be kind of at the leading edge of making sure that this kind of thing is paid attention to.
yeah, or if someone has
Yeah,
a feedback about that disability, I think Shibuya's mayor will be the first one to be keen to learn more about what you think of Shibuya not doing well, right? So, feedback is always welcomed, and I think that's what's important.
okay. Let me ask you another question. So let's say you're an entrepreneur with a typical Silicon Valley rapidly growing company, you know, doubling in size every year. 15 people this year, 40 people next year, 70 people the year after that. And so you're going as crazy as you can and expanding. At what point should you really start to look at these alternatives in Shibuya, do you think? What point in the growth of your company? Is this something to wait until you've gotten to Series C and you're going to, just you've already got plenty of backing and you devote other people to it? Or is this something really for earlier stage?
Are you talking about the acceleration program or Shibuya Startup Support in general?
Yes to both. Yes to both.
Yeah. So I said stage is not stage agnostic, right? Because sometimes we see founders with like huge backing, like millions of money already in the bank and traction in their home countries coming to Shibuya, ready to expand in Japan. That's great. We have a lot to offer in that situation. And some other founders who come through Shibuya Startup Support Visa Program, for instance, they only have ideas or MVP. I think MVP is expected, or strong ideas with strong team, for instance, will be expected. But then again, when it comes to Shibuya Startup Support and Visa Program, there is like a wide range of founders in terms of stage and skill sets coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to acceleration program, I feel like it's got to be past product market fit. But, again, like all kinds of companies surprised us already. So it really depends, I think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So you and I had talked about this a little bit offline. I think that with regard to the startups that are interested in going to Shibuya, Japan has always had a really robust early adopter consumer market that's, potentially huge. And so that's attractive on the B2C side. And I'm certainly seeing a lot of large Japanese companies that are already doing POC projects with startup companies here in Silicon Valley and in other places. And it seems like coming to Shibuya would be a really natural follow-up to a lot of those POC projects, so that maybe the company's a little further along, but this is where you really start to get traction from the first demonstration that you actually did with a big client. So I think that this is a very interesting, opportunity space, but you say there's already 10 accelerators in the Shibuya area already. What do you think this accelerator will need to do in order to be distinctive?
That's a very good question. I'm quite confident that the team in Shibuya is really, really special. And you hear every day about local governments trying to supporting startups in many ways. And we admire Kobe Kobe or Fukuoka, Nagoya, all these places that came before us. They run acceleration program, and we learn from a lot of local, Shibuya city's accelerators, 10 of them. And what we want to build on it, and we want to see what kind of edge we can create so that we can be as unique as possible. And we are exploring that as of today. We're in the middle of that exercise. However, what I can tell you is that we have Shibuya Consortium, over 100 companies backing the city to be the ecosystem. And as I noticed in the chat, Yoshi Tasaka, who is the leader in the Shibuya city, he chimed in, commented. He said, we Shibuya City are working on getting special district status, which allows Shibuya to have special regulations, including crypto tax. So this is coordination the city has been doing for the past it's not like only a past year, but several years in making, working with the government, because we are trying to be the special zone. So that can be leveraged in the making of this acceleration program. And our POC program is pretty strong, and POC by the Shibuya Consortium, big corporates, as well as we hope to build the consumer testing POC program as well. And Shibuya City on its own is like a platform, right? If you can come with your product services and test within the city, one of the biggest cities in Japan, then that is pretty strong. That's something that cannot be replicated. And I'm seeing the kind of people who offer help to Shibuya and the mayor's team. It's been kind of amazing to see the knowledge and the people who want to help Shibuya City. So maybe that's because of the mayor or Yoshi's leadership, but it's been incredible to see. So I hope, and I know the Shibuya will be special. And this will be a 10-year project, but there are definitely the team that will pull this off, I think.
Okay. We've got great comments coming in on chat and a couple of more questions, but I think that your last comment, Shiho, is a great way to end the formal part of the program, and we'll continue the rest of this off the record. First of all, before we turn off the tape recorder, I want to remind everybody that we have a program next week coming up with Ms. Clara Yunjin Chang, and she's going to be talking about a blockchain-based platform for fan services for K-pop that launched just 2 or 3 weeks ago and already has several million users. So she's our entrepreneur next week. And yeah, we'll continue this conversation for 10 or 15 more minutes now off the record. First of all, everyone, please join me in thanking Shiho for a really interesting, great presentation.